But then I think if we have a lens now of, I don't know, I made that noise, but if we have that lens of a physical therapist, we have a better understanding.
Jinx, you owe me a soda.
PSA.
I saw the PSA, bro. I talked with the in-laws. I had dinner with the in-laws. And listen.
Oh wait, I was like, wait, you already got married. What you talking about right now?
We say a lot of things. Listen, we say a lot of things on the show. We're at episode, who knows what, approaching episode 30. We've been doing this for half a year now. A lot of content has been put out there. I don't remember half the things I say, but I said something I got to walk back. That's some business that I cannot stand on. I slandered a whole group of individuals that I care about. And
Who's
those
that?
individuals, there are librarians.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna dox them here on the show, but my brother-in-law and soon-to-be sister-in-law, who I love, are librarians. I love and support public libraries. Shout out to the Library of Philadelphia. Libraries, you can do a lot more than just rent books. They do a lot of really great stuff. You can get online books that you can add to your Kindles. If you didn't know that, join your local public library. But I said something to the effect of, I look like a dorky ass librarian.
Oh man!
If I had the time, and the energy, I'll cut in the clip here. But it was a mistake.
Okay.
And I'd like to walk that back.
Hey, wait
shout out to librarians out there.
Wait a minute to your mistakes, man. They
gotta own that. I should own that, bro. That was a mistake. I made a mistake.
Oh man. Okay. Well, hopefully they all forgive you. They hit you with the silencer, bro. You better hit us back with an apology.
I'm fully walking it back. Shout out librarians. Shout out the local public libraries. You can also work there too if you're quiet. Great, safe working space. That's all.
Fun fact.
The more you know about libraries.
Fun fact: during my 7th and 8th grade years, I actually volunteered to be a what do you call it? Not a assistant librarian.
Really?
Yeah, to put some books back, basically. For like elementary school.
Dewey Decimal ass. I've never understood the Dewey Decimal system. It's very.
I don't know what that is.
It's how they organize books. It's how they organize.
Oh,
books.
Okay.
By the title and the author's name. It's probably not that complicated. I just never really thought about it.
Okay. Well.
And you didn't even stand up for librarians. That's crazy, man. I was slandering them, and you sat there. You just sat there and watched.
I apologize too. So I apologize to librarians.
Bystander, not an ally.
Librarians, you got us. You got our full respect. So
full
there
respect.
You go.
Shout out.
All right.
Shout out.
Here we go. Shout out.
Yo, all right. That's. I just had to get that off my chest. I know this episode was going to come out. We recorded a couple that we banked. So I wanted to make sure I got this on one that people are going to listen to, so they hear, so they know we can clip it.
They have
gotta put the fam on.
Unsung heroes, librarians, man.
People don't know. People
still
sleep.
Around. Still
people
around.
Sleep.
Don't sleep on them. Like, don't sleep in there too, but don't sleep.
Please don't sleep on it. Yeah, no. Please leave when it's closed. But all right. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest, JT. I was weighing heavy on my conscience.
It's a lot of respect right there for just coming back and manning up. So,
yeah. If we get anything wrong on the show, call us out. If we say anything slanderous on the show, call us out. We will publicly apologize.
Yeah.
Or publicly have a discussion with you.
Or a quick shout out.
Yeah, or a quick shout out. It's open invitation.
There we go.
Dang.
I like it. I like it.
It feels good. I feel a lot lighter.
Okay. Speaking of light, what are we talking about today?
I don't know if that's a good transition.
No?
Why?
Light and heavy, bro. Come on. Getting heavier? Let's see, now you're just too light. You're just too light now. You're getting higher over there.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm with you. I'm back with you. I see where you're going. We were going from light to heavy. Then we're going from slow to fast. Maybe we're going from low to high.
Come on, man.
The way I'm
Transition,
talking, I'm
bro.
definitely fried. I'm sorry.
20,
We were talking
24
about
episodes. Let's go, man.
we're just getting worse at this shit. We're getting so much worse at this. Oh my goodness. But today we were talking about progressive overload. One of the principles of strength and conditioning. Do you ever learn did anyone ever teach you the principles of strength and conditioning in school? Like, how did
Principles
you
of strength and
learn the
conditioning.
principles? Like, if we're talking about like specificity, progressive overload, like the things that kind of underpin the field.
I learned it during the CSCS study years,
Yeah.
but not in school. I mean, it
I
was in
th-
school, but not like during the actual courses.
yeah, I guess I did learn it in the CSCS, like the NSCA Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, whatever volume we were reading at that time. Probably one because we're old, but it I don't think it jumped out to me. Like, I don't think it jumped out at me
Yeah,
at that time. I don't think I
it didn't
got
mean
it at
anything.
that time.
It didn't mean
Yeah,
anything.
right?
They're just words.
Right? Yeah. So I think within this, and maybe we should talk about specificity as well, and maybe fatigue management. And I don't like basically like I think it's one of those things that we kind of take for granted and probably do it so much that we don't even fully understand what progressive overload is, how we would define it, how we could progress different variables, why it matters for all practitioners. You know, how the heck do we actually apply this stuff? So, hopefully this conversation gets you thinking a little bit more about progressive overload, what it actually is, and then, how does it actually come to life in your program design?
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. I think, yeah, let's talk about specificity. Man, I got the word out. I was kind of afraid there.
That's actually
Let's
why
talk
we
about.
haven't talked about it, because we were afraid to say it a bunch.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about specificity. How would you define it, and how is it? Actually, not how would you define it. How is it defined?
Specificity.
Yeah.
I think the simplest look at specificity, and I think specificity is the most important um, principle of training, right? It's essentially you get better at what you do, you adapt to what you do, right? So each stimulus has a specific adaptation to it. Hence why strength training or strength sport athletes, if I'm a power lifter, my training looks different than if I'm an endurance athlete, like a marathon runner, right? Because the outcome to whatever training stimulus or whatever stressor I put on my body is going to be specific to that task or specific to whatever that demand was placed on the body. So essentially, I think about it as you get better at what you do, and the inverse of that, you get worse at what you don't do. Generally speaking, that all looks on different time scales. But if we look at it from an adaptation standpoint, that it's the most important piece, because if I'm trying to get bigger muscles, right? If I'm trying to gain lean muscle mass, right, induce hypertrophy, well, I need to do training that's specific to inducing that outcome. Or if I want to, I don't know, like learn how to snatch, learn how to clean and jerk, well, I need to snatch and clean and jerk. Like at the simplest level, I need to do the things that I want to get better at. Like if I want to get better at basketball, I probably should play a ton of basketball, right? So it happens at a motor learning level as well, like a neurological level as well, not just in our local muscle tissues. It's kind of like a whole human thing, right? You get better at what you do, you get more accustomed to what you do. Even like think about like stress at work. Like I remember the first day of getting a bunch of emails when I became corporate Phil, and I was stressed, and now it's nothing, right? Because you get better at what you do, right? You get more
Yeah.
accustomed and adapted to what you do. That is specificity.
Okay. I like that. So how does that relate to progressive overload?
That's a good question. Right. Again, I think it's the foundation, because if I'm doing the wrong thing, it doesn't matter if I'm getting better at it because it's the wrong thing. So you talk about being directionally correct all the time, right? And I love that. Am I generally going in the right direction? Like if my goal is weight loss, I might not have the perfect program, but am I generally moving in the right direction? And that doesn't mean like I'm losing a pound a week. It could just be I've started eating vegetables. I might not be losing weight right away, but I'm moving in the right direction. So
Yeah.
progressive overload has to come on top of specificity, because I want to overload and adapt in the right direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I mean, I guess technically overload can exist without specificity, and you're just getting better at whatever. But I think, putting it all together, looking at a plan, and helping someone get better, it's, are we progressively over time getting someone better or stronger or faster or bigger or smaller, right, in the direction they want to go?
Yeah. So would it be fair to say progressive overload would be overloading the system, which in this case, the system would be the human body,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Can we put more stress, and
Yeah.
I guess just defining stress as, or load as, really anything that the body does. Like, it could be walking, it could be, like I said, like answering emails, it could be lifting weights, it could be running velocities, it could be running distances, like it could be so many different things. There's definitely a couple main ones, but it really is, we really can look at it from a whole human approach.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and like, you get better at the things that you do, the things that you experience. It's probably like, if you get super in the weeds, it's probably like it falls apart from a nutritional standpoint. Like, I think, if you eat too much of the same foods, that potentially could be negative. And you don't expose yourself to any other foods, that could
Yeah.
potentially have a negative impact, I guess. But yeah, that's probably going too weird. Getting too
No, I
weird.
mean that's fair to say because like something in my head lately, I don't really speak out to it much because I don't really know how to really communicate effectively to where the point of this episode is like, how do we get people better?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not really keen on just saying consistency is key because
Mm.
there's more to that, right? When we
Mm.
say consistency is key, that means there's consistent progression, not
Yeah.
just doing the same thing over and over, unless your goal is to do the same thing over and over.
Yeah. Which is a weird goal, but
I mean,
rock
like
on.
sometimes it is, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes people do come in and they're like, I just want to walk every day,
Yeah.
and that is the goal. So I
That is
mean,
it.
that's the goal.
And again, it's not like, it's not a bad thing from a movement standpoint. I know something I say all the time, but I never want to discourage movement, and thinking about the folks who come into the gym and just like rip 20 minutes on the elliptical every day.
How did I know you were
Like,
gonna bring that man up again, man? Leave him alone, bro.
I talk about, JT's heard me talk about energy system development. Like, you've seen me give that presentation like 100,000
Leave
times.
that man alone.
It's got to be so boring to watch that
It's
presentation.
hilarious, actually. Same guy, he's ripping apart.
just
He's just trying to be
just
on the elliptical,
dunking on
bro.
this poor man. I'm not gonna bring him up here, but it's so you're on the elliptical for 20 minutes every day. Like, that's obviously infinitely better than not doing that, right? Like, yes, you might not be progressing, but at the very least, like, you're maintaining a base level of health, a base level of exercise, a base level of physical activity. You're keeping your blood pressure and blood markers in check, not to mention any short-term like cardio protective benefits of endurance exercise. There's a lot of crazy good shit that happens when you exercise. And I think we get so caught up in the adaptation of it all. But I'd still always argue that progressing somewhere is going to be better.
Sure. Yeah. And before we get too far in the weeds here, I think just going back to what progressive overload means and how we can do that from a programmatic standpoint, at least calling out the differences between who our clients are and how that really affects how we progress over time. So something I mentioned to you earlier offline is you have your competition based clients versus your non-competition based clients. So you can call them your athletes or Gen Pop, which I think it's whatever you want to call them. Is there a
Yeah.
timeline or is there not a specific timeline? Right.
I love that distinction.
Yeah. So I think now we can have a better idea of like progressive overload in that timeline specifically, or a more defined timeline that you would just have with your client. So meaning if you come to me, you know, I'm just trying to gain 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, does that mean, or when do you want to gain 10 pounds by. And it's more of a, like, I don't know, I just do. I think that gives you a better, timeline to work with,
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
to understand what other variables you can manipulate versus you're in season,
Yeah.
you're an athlete. I got
Yeah.
4 years in the school. That's a more clear, defined timeline annually that you can really dive deep into.
Mhm.
So I think
Mhm.
understanding what those look like will give us a better idea of, like, hey, maybe those 10 pounds are really just you saying you're just trying to look better, over
Yeah. Like,
time.
what does that
And
mean?
what does that mean? So I think that gives you a better idea of, like, maybe adding 5 pounds every 2 weeks on the squat does not actually mean adding 5 pounds every 2 weeks in the squat. Maybe
Or
it's
it's gonna
like,
be impossible very quickly.
right, exactly. So I think having that continuous conversation with that
Mhm.
person will give you a better idea of, like, how you can define progressive overload
Yeah.
through the timeline that we're working with. But yeah, that's something in my mind that I always try to have a conversation with my Gen Pop clients is, like, I want them to bench a little heavier over time, but
Mhm. Mhm.
do they actually want that? Or do they just
Yeah.
want their shoulders to feel better? I think those continuous questions, or continuous conversation should be had so you can actually understand other variables you can manipulate that you'll talk about
Mhm.
in the program
Mhm.
itself. Um,
God, just hear my mind going right now.
yeah, what you got? What's your
I'm thinking. I'm
mind?
thinking. I'm thinking about. I don't want. I don't want to get too far ahead. So I guess we'll go definition. Because I don't want to get too far ahead. Then we just go off the
Fair.
rails immediately after we do definition. We'll just go crazy. Because there's some good stuff in there. But so I think like textbook. I haven't found a better definition than Mike Isertel or Dr. Mike Isertel and Chad Wesley Smith's Scientific Principles of Strength Training, little old Renaissance periodization book. It's a powerlifting book, but it gives like a general definition and then a powerlifting specific definition for all these principles. I still haven't found a better resource as far as talking about principles of training and talking about progressive overload, to be honest. So if you have not read that book yet, we can link it here in the show notes, but 1000% go pick that book up. I think it's pretty timeless. But they talk about it like the stimulus on average is greater than recent historical stimuli. Right. And I think one of the big pieces in that is it doesn't have to change every single week. So JT, you mentioned it doesn't have to be 5, 10, 2.5, whatever pounds heavier every single week. Right. And I know we've probably all experienced and we've probably all had clients who have gotten the beginner gains. Right. So hey, we start day one, they back squat 95 pounds for 5. Like, yes, that's pretty good. Next week, 100. The following week, 105. The next week, 110. The following week, 115 until forever, right? But then you think about that in a year, are they going to be back squatting 200 plus pounds? Just a little quick math for the haters. Yeah, probably not, right? Unless they're freaky, unless they're
Mhm.
strong, but there's a good chance they're not, right? So you know generally speaking, can my training, if I look back after a couple weeks, after a couple months, generally speaking, has my training gotten harder, for lack of a better term, right? Has the stimulus, the stress that I'm putting on my body gotten or it just increased in some meaningful way over that period of time? Especially as you get more advanced and looking at our Gem Plop clients, like life stuff happening,
Mm.
or a lot of our non-calendar based clients. JT, I'm stealing that.
Yeah.
That's now our thing. Our non-calendar based clients, like life's gonna like training isn't the most important thing for a lot of
Mhm.
folks. So like, yeah, there's gonna be weeks on the back burner. There's gonna be weeks missed, and that's
Mhm.
okay because historically, has the stimulus gotten greater over time? So that's the biggest piece of the definition. The only other thing that I'll add is something that I love that the folks at Renaissance Periodization talk about a ton, is that the stimulus has to be within the threshold of adaptation for that specific system. So looking at the Goldilocks principle, it can't be too low and it can't be too high, right? So it can't just be insane or you're not going to get better, right? So, thinking about like, if JT and I, popped up and ran a marathon, right? I ran it, JT scooted it. We're going to be smoked. we're not going to adapt. Like our bodies are just going to hopefully come back to homeostasis in a week or two.
Hmm.
Right. We're not adapting that training because the stimulus is beyond what our body can handle right now. So thinking about
Yeah.
your client's
Yeah.
training, I in my opinion, they will talk about it like for volume prescription, like your minimum effective dose and your maximal recoverable volume being like landmarks you can find. In my opinion, I think it's really hard to find if your training isn't just bodybuilding, because it's like, well, I'm jumping and I'm sprinting and I'm throwing stuff and I'm lifting heavy and I'm doing condition. Like it's going to be really hard to find
Yeah.
the minimum effective dose and maximum recoverable volume for all of those things, in my opinion. But I think it's a good theoretical guideline. Like, am I
Right.
doing too much or am I doing too little?
Hmm.
So those are, when I look at it, those are kind of the two biggest pieces that then break or define um, progressive overload. But anything to think, anything to add to those?
No, not really. I think defining it to actual things. What would that look like in our programming?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we look at like what are we actually overloading? And again, I think the two biggest things are going to be intensity. So like weight on the bar, how heavy are you lifting? And then volume. So how many repetitions are you doing each week? How many sets are you doing each week? And then how many sessions are you doing each week? But it's still total volume. So really, it all comes down to how many reps really are you doing.
Sure.
Now we're doing them under different fatigue levels. They have different adaptations, but at the end of the day, how many reps are you accumulating throughout the week is kind of where it all boils
Sure.
down to a certain degree. But again, they're all going to have different adaptations. So those are the two main ones. Like that's bread and butter, generally speaking. When we're talking about like physiological adaptations, like
Hmm.
or even neural adaptations or neuromuscular adaptations. But then you can look at things like, can I progress range of motion over time? Like if I'm working with a client who can't squat well, can I progress his squat depth over time? Can I progress density over time? So like I'm doing the same work in less time.
Hmm.
So I'm just decreasing the rest from week to week. Can I increase power or velocity? Right. So can I increase the speed of movement from week to week over time? And then another one, kind of somewhat related to range of motion to a certain degree, but can I increase complexity? So this isn't so much a muscular adaptation per se, but it's like, can I get better at the skill? Can I do more challenging skills over time? Like I think about like learning an Olympic lift variation, right? I might do snatch pulls or snatch high pulls into muscle snatches, into power snatches, into full. I might start from the hang and then go to the low hang and then go from the floor. Like I'm progressing the complexity of the movement over time. And you talked about, non-calendar clients. It's like it might not have to be I'm trying to progress, bench press weight
Hmm.
for 52 weeks. It could be I'm trying to get really good at a specific movement because it's challenging,
Yeah.
because it's engaging, right? So, you know, is it Olympic lift? Is it a Turkish get up? I don't care, but like, I think for
Yeah.
a lot of folks, technical mastery can be a fun thing to chase down, and it's a different adaptation, but I think it's still something when you look at your program that you can start to progress over time.
I don't think it's just a fun thing, but it's a necessary thing
Mhm.
in the sense of when we are progressively overloading our clients through movement slash exercises, they should be pretty good at doing those movements slash exercises, right? So I
Yeah.
think we as coaches, I think, start to forget about the technical aspect and learning those things as a skill, and we just think of like, oh, this person is just did a bent over row for 20 pounds this week for the first time ever in his life, and now he's doing
Mm-hmm.
25 next week, and like that looks nice. There is a progression there, but are you accounting for like the amount of skill that was actually needed to learn that? Like maybe
Yeah.
his base of the stimulus was actually like 35, and he was just trying to learn the movement, right? So I
Yeah.
think we definitely need to incorporate or appreciate the skill aspect of the movement, and knowing where that is and knowing that we don't feel our client's body, there has to be a level of communication there of like, okay, where is the actual place of understanding where the average stimulus is to start to push into the threshold, right? So I think there's something there that we should appreciate, and that's I guess that's more of the training age aspect of where that is
Yeah.
with that person in front of us, and how do we now
Yeah.
incorporate that through all the other variables of the program.
Please don't touch your client's body. Please don't feel your client's body. Don't
How
feel
you
it.
feeling right here, bro? How you feeling right here?
how
Let me
that
touch
thing feel?
that.
No. But that's such a great point. Like even looking at research, like research's goal is to try to control as many variables as possible. So like more often than not, they're gonna choose things like a leg press and a leg extension because it's a machine. There's still some skill. There's obviously still some intramuscular
Yeah,
coordination, but it's way less skillful than doing a lunge or a squat. Right. So like that's
sure.
such a good point and such a good thing for people to keep in mind. Like even looking at like the neurological adaptations of training, like yeah, you get better at coordinating muscle contraction internally. Then you also get better at like technically performing the movement. And don't forget that literally everything we do in the gym is a skill. Some skills are easier, obviously. So like even a leg press is still a skill, way easier. But a back squat's a skill, a front squat's a skill. Like you have to learn how to perform the movement. So yeah, I love that call of like, you know, like you might be getting stronger, but like you're just getting better at the movement.
Yeah, which is, I guess you can argue that that is progression,
Still
right? That's part
stronger.
of it.
Yeah.
Still stronger, and like you mentioned earlier, we just need to be directionally correct. Are we getting towards a goal that we talked about anyway, just through different means? And I would say if there is a level of technical mastery within a skill, say a squat, I think that complexity variable that you can manipulate can be a little bit safer to incorporate,
Mm-hmm.
right? If there is a back squat in the program and your client is showing a high proficiency in that
Yeah.
movement, hey, you pull a little bit more levers. You can incorporate some eccentric, some
Mm-hmm.
concentric, right? Different
Mm-hmm.
ways to now progressively overload. And for me, I'm talking to my younger self, before, not to jump ahead there, but like
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't appreciate the technical skill that is
Mm.
required for that movement, and I would just start to add in what I would think progressive overload means,
Yeah.
and I would just get messed up. He would just get messed up. So those kind of things are now in my mind of like skill. Okay, now where does it make sense to pull those levers of more sets, more reps? Your
Yeah.
um, other variables, power, velocity, all those things into the program based off of where they are there.
Yeah. So you're saying in those cases you were adding in maybe, heavier loads from week to week or adding in more reps or sets or whatever without the client having competency of the movement.
A little bit, yeah, and just because the NSCA told me, right? That's
Hey, we go
that's how you
we go
progressively
from
overload.
8 or 10 to 8 to 6 to 4 to 2.
Yeah. But no, I think it's more of the understanding that I didn't really have a movement bandwidth in my mind of where this
Mm.
person should be. Like
Mhm, mhm,
I think
mhm.
that's a squat. All right, let's so that felt
Technically, they're
fine.
bending their knees, bending the
Should have felt
hips.
fine.
Yeah.
Let's go heavier. And sometimes it works, right? But then I think if we have a lens now of, I don't know, I made
Yeah.
that noise, but if we have that lens of a physical therapist, we have a better understanding of biomechanics, right? Does it kind of look like where I want them to be? Does it feel right? Are they ready to now start to progress with those other levers that I mentioned? So you got,
I was I was gonna let it fly. If you
I
didn't say
know.
anything, we would have kept rolling. I was locked. We were gonna keep rolling. It was a very good point. If you didn't say anything, we were gonna keep
Thank you.
on rolling.
Thank
That
you.
was good. Oh man. So you all right. You mentioned PTs, talk about physios. Um we hit on it a little bit, I guess, when we were talking about the definition and we were talking about how it relates to specificity, but like when you look back, if you were explaining this to your younger self, you were explaining this to a coach, how would you describe progressive overload's importance?
I think progressively overloading what? Like having an understanding of what that
Mm,
means and what you're trying to actually overload gives me a better understanding of the levers that you can pull. So if
mm,
we said earlier, progressively overloading the system of the person, of the human,
yeah,
okay, knowing that the system is now a human being of different stressors that
yeah,
most of them we can't control, but a few things we can. What are the things we can control? Understanding the other things that we can't. So, for example, if it's a client coming in super stressed and they got bad shoulders, bad knees, I in my head, all right, I still need to progressively
mhm,
progress this person, but this person's actually already overloaded, right? So if it's like you mentioned earlier with the threshold, if it's too high, how
yeah,
do I now bring it back down to that place where we want them to essentially progress them where we want to be, right? And I think just that line of where they are of making sure they're not undertrained or overtrained. How do we get them back into that Goldilocks principle
yeah,
in the middle, so I can progress them on the variable that I want to progress them, and that's through the training that I'm
mm,
that they're with me for. Kind of mixed up my
yeah.
words there, but hopefully
I
everybody
think I
gets
see what
an
you're saying.
understanding of like at least human being, the system. Where are they? Are they ready for me to progressively overload them through my programming? If so, okay, now here's some extra reps, here's some extra sets. If not, okay, where do we need to go to make sure they're
Hmm.
back to where I can get them without getting to that point of
Yeah,
overstress and injury prone and all that stuff. What are your thoughts there?
that's a fair point. Like, I think what I would say is that you can always overload in some way, shape, or form. But with your point in mind, I'd argue that especially for a lot of people like couch to training again, like getting back into the swing of things, um, and shit, even some off-season athletes I've seen who just come in just after, depending on how long their off season is, like they're coming in like I haven't done anything in a very long time. Or think about some high school football players I've worked with who have taken like most of the spring off and not doing any not doing anything at all, like when they
Right.
didn't have to train or they couldn't train for whatever reason. So they're coming in with such a low bandwidth for adaptation that I'd argue that a lot of our initial training plans are actually probably a little too intensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like we probably could start, and my general rule of thumb is like start lower than you think, progress slower than you think. Um, is a more often than not my approach. Now, granted, some of our calendar sport or calendar based clients, like, hey, if we got 4 weeks, then yeah, we got to rip it. Like, sorry, this is what we have to do. Um, but that's obviously a very case specific thing. But thinking about that person who's just coming to the gym, I can think about so many times where I've had someone do like, 3 sets of 8 body weight lunges and they couldn't walk for a week.
Right.
Like no BS, could not walk because they were so sore because they haven't done that. So
Right.
it's like I probably could have done 1 set
Yeah.
and that would have been enough stimulus.
Right.
Now, granted, maybe I start them with ISO holds, or maybe I start them with partial range, so we can start learning how I'm managing my center of gravity. You know what I'm saying? I can manage my pelvis in space. Like, you can argue the different, but even then, like maybe I'll start them with that on the ground,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Like, hey, do you know where your pelvis is? Can you stack
Yeah.
your pelvis in your rib cage on the ground, lying down? Cool. Can you stack it in a quadruped position? Cool. Let's do a lunge ISO hold, and then we'll come back. Like I might do something like that where I'm really breaking the skill apart. So I'm setting up this like super long runway of potential adaptation. Like you mentioned up top, basically, if I have someone for if a non-counter based client, we were training for a year, like what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to progress their squat every week. So I think again, how do we start lower than we think, progress slower than we think, and like actually make sure that stimulus is below that maximal adaptive threshold.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say all that, like my younger coach years, I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. And
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're saying. 3 sets of 8. of lunges, bro.
Yeah.
What if they can't do that? Then they better, they better
Yeah, yeah,
leave,
yeah.
right? So,
And it's a tough song and dance because they want to, like, a lot of people come in,
right,
they're like kill me. I want you to kill me with exercise right now.
right, and you can kill them, and understanding what kill actually means. Like,
Yeah.
I think of like these variations that we're referring to are like based off of the training age of the individual, right? Like you said,
Hmm.
from couch to the gym.
Hmm.
If you just have them move the arm up and down like this, that's a stimulus, right?
And probably
And
something they
I'm
haven't done.
that's it, right? Like if we could think to that level of granularity within the program, we have a better understanding of how to actually challenge that system in
Hmm.
a way to progressively overload. We don't have to have our like I think we need to challenge our thought of what a base level of
Yeah.
exercising and training program is. Just because it's a
Yeah.
foundational program doesn't mean that's foundational for everybody. Knowing
Hmm.
that a lot of the
Hmm.
coaches here listening, like we do get people who have never worked out in their life and they're 4 years old, right? And
Yeah.
they
You say
don't take the
40?
stairs. 40.
Okay. So I said
Yeah,
4, and I was
I
like,
know.
damn, what? Y'all
That
training 4-year-olds?
what are y'all doing, man? Um, right, 40 years old, never worked out.
Oh, 1000%.
I've had a plenty of them. They don't take the stairs; they take the elevator. So it's like, why
Yeah.
would you think that a lunge is appropriate for that person? It might be. Can we get them there? But
Hmm.
now let's break it down to the human level of they're just putting their leg up. Like, can we start to understand the human as a movement and not just exercise that we
Yeah.
think as foundational? So going back, I think just the specificity of the human being and knowing their training age really matters
Hmm.
of how
Hmm.
and how progression looks like
Yeah.
uh, through your programming.
Yeah. Yeah. Because in that case, so let's think. All right, new clients coming in, they're 40 years old. They have never really played sport. Maybe they're active when they were kids, but at this point, that doesn't really matter. They're not active recently. Like you said, they're taking the elevator. Let's say they're getting like 1,000 steps per day, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. Spending a lot of time sitting, obviously, spending a lot of time on the computer for work, right? Again, like a pretty standard archetype of someone who could potentially come into the gym. Like, all right, what could we progress over time? Like, what would be the first thing you progress with that client or look to progress?
I think assuming there's a goal of weight loss or body composition, whatever you want to call it, it's going to look the same anyway. But I feel the the understanding of the position pattern performance model, like can they get into
Yeah.
positions that we want them to get? If not, okay, how do we get them there? Can they get them into that? Can we get them into that pattern? Okay. Can we start to load that pattern? Okay. So that's for me where I would start into
Hmm.
okay, where does this person's program need to be, and how can I make them successful enough to where they're progressing? Right. So, for
Hmm.
example, if a squat is something that I want them to do,
Hmm.
show me squat. Okay, it's not looking good. How do we start to put in certain variables to make sure they can get into that position of what a squat in my head should look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
differences on your end and how you would look
No,
at
I'm
that?
with you. I think it always starts there. Like, what shapes can you make? How can you coordinate movement? Like, it always starts there. And seeing at a base level, like kind of generally what people are capable of. I think for someone like that coming in, again, like they probably could survive a workout. And I've put people through it. I've seen other coaches, but we've all done it with
Yeah.
with any of our clients, regardless of their background. Put people through a workout, they survive it. They barf afterwards. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, clammy, about to pass out afterwards, and we're kind of like, ah, my bad. But it's like, I think for a client like that, I want to build their capacity to handle work. Like, I want to. They can't even really train yet. They can barely exercise. Like, so I want to give you first, like, yeah, we're looking at position pattern power and seeing like how do you move, and then I'm like, all right, let me build your work capacity. So it's probably at first progressing volume week over week and maybe not even thinking about load that much. Like, we can progress both. Like if 1 week you're feeling strong, like shoot, let's progress both. Like I think it's pretty impractical to try to progress just one, like at any point. Like, yeah, I might keep volume the same in certain phases of training, but like over especially long periods of time, like you're going to have to progress both
Mm-hmm.
volume and intensity. But I think for this person in particular, I want to give them the capacity to work. So I want to build up volume over time, and then I'm slowly going to decrease rest over time. So like
Mm-hmm.
first we build up volume. So they have, we're doing 1 set of lunges and then 2 sets of lunges. And, you know what? I'm doing 1 workout a week. And then over time, I'm doing 1.5 workouts a week. And then I'm doing 2 workouts a week. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm doing 3 workouts a week, right? Like I'm progressing that over time. And then after months and months and months and months and months and months of doing that, well, then maybe I'll progress density and I'll just decrease rest within that workout. So I'm doing the same amount of work, just resting less. So I'm just getting better and better and better at handling the workload. And then over that time, as I've increased training frequency and volume, hopefully throughout that period, they've learned how to do, what you could call like quote unquote foundational movements in the gym, which I don't know if that really exists. I don't know if I totally agree with that. But like looking at squat, hinging, lunging, vertical and horizontal pushing and pulling. It would
Yeah.
probably be like the big ones that people talk about. I think they're important movements. I just don't know if they're fundamental or foundational to life, but they're probably foundational to a lot of the things that we do in the gym. Like they're like if you can do a body weight squat, well, that is just actually might not mean shit, but that's where we start.
Sure.
I'm gonna start somebody there, and then know
Yeah.
that that's gonna have some transfer to a front squat or trap bar deadlift or a back. You know what I mean?
No, I do. And I'm glad you said that. You're getting my brain fired up. I think the whole push, pull, squat, hinge, carry, all that stuff, like it sounds nice and it is nice and it makes sense for most human beings, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's I think it's more of a principle than the actual programming variable. Like you got to do these
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
right? And it's how do we get a balanced human being? These are things that our
Yeah.
human body probably can do. Let's start there, but doesn't mean we have to always squat. Doesn't mean we always have to do push-up. All those things that we think are foundational. Let's let's take it up. It's a nice principle we should appreciate as we start to look
Yeah.
at things that they need. So, anyway, I'm glad you said that.
I got lost
Yeah,
in that one. I was like, wait, I don't know if I really believe that. I don't know. I actually don't know what I want to
yeah,
say about that. But
yeah,
that's a conversation for another time there. But yeah, I mean, like again, like with this example, this person, the training has gotten harder over time, and again, like that's a nice, beautiful, perfect chef's kiss theory. In reality, it's never going to go like you think it's going to go. So it's not a straight line,
hmm
right? It's going to be up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. But then again, you look back over 6 months, 3 months, whatever, the trend line, the average trend line is up. So in this case, training's gotten more voluminous.
Here we go. Add it to the
Here we
list.
go. Here we go. Here we go. We're doing more work each week. And I think like progressing, oh my God, I can't talk anymore, JT. Progressing sessions is a super slept on thing. Like if you
Progressing
can do it, the
sessions.
number of sessions per week, like training frequency,
Got it.
is a super slept on thing. Even like there's some interesting, even for like more advanced athletes, like if I'm squatting once a week, maybe I'll progress to squatting twice a week, and one day's low intensity, one day's high intensity, just because that training frequency seems to have a positive effect for strength. Like if your client's training 2 days a week, progressing to 3 days a week could be a massive change and a
hmm
massive positive change, right? So, especially if they're not doing much else outside of their workouts, right? So, if they're
hmm
not playing a sport or they're not super active, like that progression could open up a whole new door for them of potential adaptation, of learning movement, of getting stronger without having to try to, add 5 pounds to their goblet squat
Sure.
every single week.
From 2 to 3, you said
Yeah.
sessions per week. It's funny that you say that because I've had some clients where progression actually meant going from 4 to 3 sessions a week.
Yeah. 1,000%.
right? And it's hard to wrap your brain around that in the sense of like how is doing less more? And I think coaches understand that when they say less is more, like yeah. But then it's understanding of why that is.
Mm-hmm.
Why would reducing the amount of work increase or help them progress to their goals? And it's because of the system. The system was too overloaded,
Exactly.
and I reduced it to get them to a nice place to actually progress in a healthy way, where
Yeah.
they were actually um, responding well to the stimulus that I was
Yeah.
trying to, you know, dose them with. So I think understanding, again, it goes back to the system of the human being.
Mm.
Progression is going in that direction. It doesn't always mean the direction of increasing weight, volume, intensity, all
Well,
those things, right?
in that case, they were violating the second half of the definition, right? They were violating the fact that it was above their maximal
Mm-hmm.
adaptation threshold, right? They couldn't recover from the total volume of stress, right? So, and that's where things start to get real funky and tricky and weird, because all of our training programs, for the most part, are pretty concurrent. Like at the very least, you're doing like strength and some like volume or hypertrophy stuff. Like you're probably doing that stuff and some sort of energy system work. Like you might be doing that stuff and some sort of like something fast rate of force development, like plyometrics or sprinting. Like there's that now all of a sudden like we're training a bunch, and then also we're throwing in like sports skill. Like now we're training a ton of stuff. And then we're throwing in life stressors. Right. We're trying a ton of load on the body, so it's hard to track all this stuff. But I think that's a great thing to be on the lookout for. Like if your clients are stagnant or beat down, or like having a hard time progressing, like maybe they need more rest or more fuel. Like, hey, if you're training for a marathon or whatever, and you have to hit 40 miles a week. I've never trained for a marathon. I have no idea. But you have to hit 40 miles a week. Well, shit. If that's what we have to do, how can I support that?
Yeah.
Probably more carbohydrate, probably more rest,
Mm-hmm.
and some stress management tactics. Right,
Yeah.
knowing that
Yeah.
I gotta keep the total load on this person below the maximum adaptation threshold.
Right. And it goes back to what I mentioned, like what are the variables we can't control and what are
Mm-hmm.
the variables that we can. If mileage is something that we like, it has to be done. They got to
Yeah.
run. Okay, they're still coming into us or coming to our sessions. What are the variables I can manipulate there to get them in that threshold? So no, that's a fair point to at least call out of understanding of um, and appreciating those principles, right? And
Yeah.
how does that actually look in our program? But um, give us let's go into a little bit more of how does it actually look in the program. What is
There's
the
there's there's actually one that I'm fresh in my mind that I was just thinking about, because we had one of our coaches, Colin Darby. Shout out Colin, you're the
this
man.
question, by the way?
This is a great question. It's great concept, great thing to talk about. But talking about like, all right, like I think a lot of people get intensity. I think a lot of people kind of get volume. Like it's kind of easy to conceptualize. Now we talked about range of motion, we talked about complexity and technique. Another one is velocity. But the more I think about it, it's actually just force. So it's actually just everything's force, right? Like everything's just kind of impulse. It's like force over
Mm,
time. But velocity exposure, really what you're doing in a lot of cases is you're progressively overloading the exposure of higher and higher peak forces. So when I'm thinking about plyometrics and introducing someone to plyometrics, and really, like, people talk about training the brakes before you can train the gas, but really it's like, can I improve your tissue tolerance and your ability to manage eccentric forces so that you can actually utilize the stretch shortening cycle and not just fold like a chair when you hit the ground at high
mm-hmm.
forces. I there's no better example of that. If anyone's ever done like a standing triple jump or a running triple jump, so like right left into a basically like right foot hop, right foot
Yeah.
bound to left foot jump into max distance. Like nothing prepares you or helps you understand like your body's protective mechanism than when you do that and your body just shuts down.
Mm.
Like you hit your left foot hits the ground at a force it's never experienced, and your body's like, no, and you just fold,
Like
like you just fold and roll.
the videos of the people on the trampoline kind of
Yeah,
just come down.
you just absolutely fold. Your body's like, no,
Right.
fuck that. I'm going to break if you keep doing this to me. So when I'm introducing someone to a plyometric and trying to build their one tissue tolerance and their ability to manage eccentric forces, well, then I might start with like, people hate snap downs, but like for a lot of people who've never ever jumped, and I mean like maybe never ever jumped, I'm probably going to start there so they can start to handle eccentric forces. So I'm going to go slow, and then I'm going to go a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, because faster speeds means higher peak forces, because I need to turn on the brakes faster, same load. Well, I need higher forces to do that. Right? So it's going to be higher peak forces. Same thing with like like if I'm starting with, I'll probably do that and extensive like pogo jumps, so like in place, just 2 foot like jumping rope type stuff. I'm gonna start really slow, like super full foot, longer time on the ground, and then progress to faster, same height. And that shorter ground contact time just means higher peak forces.
Mm-hmm.
And then I might get higher, which is higher peak forces, and then higher, which is higher peak forces. Like over time, I'm exposing this person to faster and faster speeds, but really what that's doing is it's exposing them to higher and higher peak forces. So I'm going from slow to fast, but what that's doing is managing the force that they're being exposed to. And again, I'm really making sure that it's within their recoverable threshold,
Mm-hmm.
especially from a tissue standpoint. So looking at, Achilles, patellar tendon, looking at someone's ability to brace at their spine, like, which I think is something that's slept on, and something as coordination based as jumping. So
Mm-hmm.
I think hopefully that made sense, and hopefully that was an example for people to wrap their head around, and like, all right, how can I progress something that isn't load?
So
All right, cool.
you got this
I'm
40-year-old
progressing their
client again.
speeds.
You got this
Yeah.
40-year-old client, maybe 2 weeks in, kind of get the gist of what's going on. Essentially, we they should be able to jump at in some time in their
They could
life.
jump. Yeah.
You're right. How does that look like now from a programming standpoint? Let's just say we got them twice a week.
Hmm.
Uh, 2 weeks into training. How do I set them up into that place of having the ability to absorb peak forces in this plyometric block that I have?
Yeah, I again, I think I'm gonna probably start them bilaterally with some sort of snap down or drop squat variation, and again, like probably like 1 to 2 sets of 5 reps to start, and it's literally just they're starting tall, like hands overhead, and then pulling themselves down into a quarter squat, like athletic base position, and we'll just start slow. Like just feel that out, see how that feels. And then maybe we'll start not hands overhead, but like hands towards your chest and then drop down a little bit faster. Just start tall and drop down, kind of naturally find that base position. And then over time, that can become almost like a little bit of a bounce off the ground. So I'm gonna kind of bounce and pop back up, bounce and pop back up, right? I'm progressing towards getting them ready for that. And then from there, I'm going to find some sort of, extensive pogo hop variation, so some like light jumping in place that's continuous that they can handle. And what I'm using to gauge that is, how does it look, how does it feel, does it look athletic and smooth and fluid? No. Then offload their body weight more. So a lot of times we look at bands as like an advanced accelerative, faster overspeed plyometric, where I'm like pulling the band down and I'm jumping and throwing my head through the ceiling. But I could use a thick monster band coming from the top of a squat rack, pull it down, and now what I've done is I've offloaded some of my body weight. So
Yep.
now I can pogo jump in place. It can look super athletic. I can train the rhythmic, fluid nature, the coordinative nature of jumping. I can train the Achilles. I can train the foot. I can train it to work with the hip.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not just smashing this person's foot and ankle or their spine
Mm-hmm.
in a manner that is super safe for them and under their adaptive threshold versus just throwing them into pogos and they kind of look like shit.
Mm-hmm.
These are looking good, and then over time maybe I go lighter band, lighter band, lighter band. I'm building volume. I'm increasing intensity with lighter bands. And now when it comes time to like, all right, this person's getting pretty good, I can start to do some different jump variations. Maybe I can just start increasing the intensity of that stuff. Maybe I can take it to bounds, start playing around with that stuff. Maybe I can take it to a box jump, whatever, play around with that, jump over hurdles. Like they've experienced it from two ends. So they've started to experience some higher eccentric forces with the different snap down and maybe stepping off a box and landing variations. And they've started to put it all together in our, extensive light pogo variations or continuous jump variations. And I would do both of those probably each day. So I would do both styles of jumping in each session. Honestly, my foundational phases look a lot different than a lot of people's foundational phases because I'll just do the same thing every day.
What do you mean?
Like it sounds lazy, but it's like you're coming twice a week, you're gonna do the same workout. Because like think
Why would you
about it,
say
like
it sounds lazy?
because you're doing the same thing. Like I think people will be like, all right, I'm gonna mega mind this workout and do like two very different things. Like it's just like Pythagorean theorem on the whiteboard. But I'm like, no, I want you to be like, what's what? So like some of it's my personal bias. We're really getting off the rails here. Some of this is my personal bias. So like, what's your philosophy? What do you think is important? What does this person want and need? Again, JT, like you said earlier, a lot of it's gonna look the same. Sometimes it doesn't. But if I'm like, cool, I want this person to be able to squat, and I want this person to they love pressing overhead because they think they saw it in a video and they think it looks sick. I just made that up. So they want to press overhead. Sick. So we're gonna squat and press overhead both times, like both sessions. And I'm also gonna do probably some sort of vertical or horizontal pulling and then some sort of hinging pattern. And
Mm-hmm.
that'll be my workout. But we're gonna do that both sessions because like if you want to get better at shooting a basketball, how many times a week are you going to shoot a basketball? Probably more than once. So like squatting's a skill, managing your pelvis and managing your center of gravity as it moves by your base support is a skill. So I'm just going to do it a bunch.
Yeah.
And they're going to get really good at it. And then after 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, when I feel like, all right, yeah, they're competent in the pattern. Well, then we can change it.
Right. I wouldn't say. I mean, I know you're just saying that, but it's not being lazy having the same program or same workout twice a week
Yeah.
with an individual who lacks certain skills in those movements. Right. That's literally having intent and understanding. Like, okay, this person needs to learn these exercises, so let's keep doing them because this is the more frequency, the better they'll learn the skill. So I would argue that mega minding is actually a little bit more lazy because you're not really understanding the principles of what we're talking about here with specificity and progressive overload.
And that's just that, right? If you go full mega mind from Jump Street, like who are you writing a program for?
Mm-hmm.
Is it for you or them?
Right.
Right? Especially your brand new client.
Right.
Who is this program for?
Yeah.
Is it for you because you're bored? Or is it for them because it's what they need?
And when you say that, a lot of these questions that come from that I have with coaches of like, how do I progressively overload this client? Is it that you're trying to overload them progressively to their goals, or is this you asking, how do I do something different? How do I, like those are two different questions.
Yeah.
What's the intent here? So if it's you're trying to get this person stronger, bigger, better, whatever better is based off of their goals, hey, these are simple principles and levers that you can start to pull: volume, intensity, work capacity, all those things in a very specific manner, right? But if it's like, I'm just trying to do something new, that might be the wrong question here of what you're trying to ask. So yeah, going back, who are you writing this program for? Is it for you or is it for your clients? But taking us back into the rails, let's go back. Programming, you talked about peak forces. That's a way to incorporate that into the program. Manipulating speed.
Mm-hmm.
What else can we do?
God, we talk about complexity and technique a little bit. I guess we can talk about intensity, to kind of round it out as like the most common one, but really try to make it really tangible. The fact that it doesn't have to increase every single week, and like
Mm.
I look at my own training and kind of how I write training, um, for a lot of more concurrent styles of training for a lot of folks who just like they want to stay athletic. Right. So I'm thinking like they want to stay athletic. They want to be able to do the things they want to do. They're playing pickleball. They're going hiking. But also, they want to look good naked. Right. They want to get kind of jacked. They want to get a little stronger. They want to have fun in the gym. That's kind of like how for a lot of people that I write programs for is what their goal is. And that's what my goal is at this point. That's what I love writing, and love tinkering with. So like looking at my current squatting regimen, I front squat once a week and I'm cleaning once a week. So I'm doing like a full
Mm-hmm.
clean once a week. So I kind of take the clean as like my moderate, lower volume days, and the front squat I try to push it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to keep those days pretty spaced out. But like I'll do 2 to 3 sets of 5 reps at RPE 8. So like leaving 2 reps in the tank ish. For me, RIR, like reps in reserve, always works better in my mind than RPE. I don't know why that is, but for me, like that just reps in reserve just feels more tangible in my own mind than
Mm.
exertion. I don't know why.
I think that's fair to say with a lot of people that we're
And
training that has a
I
low
do
training
bias
age
it
too.
for both for any population I work with. I will bias training that way. I'll say, hey, 2 in the tank, 1 in the
Mm-hmm.
tank, 3 in the tank. But so I don't really. I will use percentage as a baseline sometimes, but often not. So I'll say, cool, 2 to 3 sets of 5 at RPE 8. Right now I'm doing 2 sets because I just got back into front squatting because I just got my squat rack and I hadn't squatted in, I hadn't front squatted in like 2 months. I've just been lunging around my basement. So just do 2 sets of 5 RPE 8, and like week 1 that might be 225, week 2 that might be 215, and then week
Mm-hmm.
3 that might be 230, and week 4 that might be 235, and then week 5 it might be 225 again. And like because I'm sprinting, I'm playing tennis, I have work stress and life, there's other shit going on. So I think, looking back on the trend line, using something like an RPE instead of a percentage now allows them to, hey, that stimulus was sufficient for today.
Sure.
That's what you needed for today. You're still getting technically better. Then we look back over the course of the cycle. Cool. It went in the right direction. Now, if it didn't go in the right direction, we did something wrong. Like you did something wrong as a coach. And put it on you because they're coming to you as a client. So this
Mm-hmm.
is your responsibility. Either they have too much stress in their life that you have not accounted for, so that we gotta figure that out, or your program was either too much or too little, which in most cases I probably argue probably too much and they're not recovering. So like if the trend line's not going up, something has gone wrong. Or I guess you could probably argue that they technically suck. Like maybe they're just technically not great at them. They technically
Sure.
suck. From a technique,
Technically,
your
suck, bro.
client sucks, bro. It's their fault. No. From a technique standpoint.
Sure.
So like if you can't like make the shape of a front rack position and you're trying to overload them, like you can only go so far before
Yeah.
things start to go wrong.
Well, there's actual restrictions that need to be addressed there,
Yeah.
right? In that technical movement. So, no, I think that's fair to call out. But like you mentioned, within that, we're monitoring their workload essentially as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do we appreciate those stresses that are coming in, and now play with those variables to make sure the stress load that they're going to leave that session with is appropriate. So for
Mm-hmm.
you, when you're doing your front squats, you said 2 sets of 5, 225. You
Yeah.
said that's a
Yeah. Four
RP
425. RPE 6.
RP 6. I believe you. I believe you. Okay, I'll give you that. Right, and then the next week you said 215,
Yeah.
right, and it was appropriate for that stimulus for
That day.
that day.
Yeah. Exactly.
But essentially, you were directionally correct. You were going that way anyway. Even though on paper, wait, why would you go
Yeah.
down? You know?
But a lot of us, I mean, if you've been training for more than a year, really like, or doing a movement for more than a year, like you're at the point where you can't add more weight every week.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's just
yeah.
not how adaptation. When you think about it, like it's not like your nervous system has to adapt, your tendons and ligaments have to adapt, your bones have to adapt, your muscle has to adapt. These are all on different time scales. Like there's so much going on. There's a
Sure.
psychological component to all of this. Like it's a mess. So it's like, again, can we just be directionally correct?
Right. And to start to land this plane here, because I think we can go on and on with the whole topic of it all.
Yeah.
For me, I would look at the timeline,
Hmm.
right, of the individual. Is there a stricter timeline that we can't really budge? Okay, there's specific variables that we have to manipulate to
Hmm.
get them to where they want to go. Now, if it's not a specific timeline, there's actually more variables that we can start to play around with to make sure they're still progressing in the right
Yeah.
direction. And then from there, training age matters a lot, right? If it's from the
Yeah.
couch to the gym, you do less. Like doing less is
Yes.
actually more because they don't do anything at all. So
Yes.
less in
Literally.
your head is actually more. So I think
Yes.
understanding that will give you a better understanding of the types of levers that you should be pulling, which is very, very low based off of
Hmm.
what you think a foundational program looks like. So if it's from a couch to the gym, literally lifting their knee up is probably a stimulus they've never had before, right?
Hip flex is
Versus,
gonna be smoked.
right? And not to say that you can't kill them, but it's more of like understanding that principle, right? Now, from like you mentioned of their training age, hey, they've been training for a while, and this,
Hmm.
me as a coach, I'm like, yo, I'm they've been training for a while. What other levers can I pull to make sure
Yeah.
they're still progressing? And I think
Hmm.
that's a little bit more applicable in the sense of maybe there's things I haven't thought of which is incorporating more velocity based principles like that
Yeah.
actually helps progress people, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
more intensity that you can incorporate within the program, and then like you mentioned with the complexity and the technique, how do we add more
Hmm.
skills into their programming to get that new stimulus that they haven't had before, right? So I think those are great principles for me to even start to think about with my
Yeah.
programming based off of the training age of the athletes clients that I have, and also based off of the sessions that I have per week. Because I think if we
Mm.
start to
Yeah.
zoom out, that gives you a better understanding of like what variables actually make sense.
Yeah.
You know,
Seriously.
anything to add there of like this as a whole?
No, I think he nailed it. Um, the one little nugget I will put in there is like there obviously is room for like variation and doing random stuff. Like not every single ounce of your program needs to be progressed week to week. And that's probably something we'll have to come back around on and touch in a part two of like where's the room for randomness and variability and
Yeah, yeah,
the workout of the day style finishers. Like can that still live in the program? And I think it very much can. But no, a lot of great points. I guess wrapping it up, is there any thoughts, any questions you want people to be asking themselves after listening to this?
yeah. I think for me, like, can I look at my program as a coach? Can I look at my clients' programming? What are the variables that I'm already implementing? Is it adding the reps? Is it the sets? Is it the the motions of the movement? You know, the isometrics, the concentric, the eccentric. What other things am I adding within the program to get the stimulus that I'm trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Can you just list those out of what you know,
Yeah.
what you're able to coach? Now from there, how do we start to add certain things or remove certain things to make sure they're progressing in the right direction? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think understanding what those levers are and those principles of progressive overload, just put them on a sheet.
Yeah.
You know, how
Yeah.
what are they currently, and what would make sense to make sure they're going up.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I think for me, One thing that actually throughout this conversation started jumping into my mind was like, all right, are we actually trying to identify this person's maximal recoverable threshold?
What does that
Like,
mean?
do we know that threshold of adaptation? Like, so how to, or even their minimum effective dose? Like, are we trying to find that range and trying to find that sweet spot with the intensity and the volume and the speeds that we're training at? So we know, all right, this is enough to produce an adaptation. This is enough to get better, but it's not so much that they're smoked. Right? Are we trying to identify those things? And I think the best way to try to, again, I think it's still more theoretical than like finding actual reps and sets. But I think for in our case, for any coach's case, it's, are we objectively tracking something?
Sure.
Right? Are we objectively tracking load over time? Are we objectively tracking how someone's showing up over time? And that's going to give you insight into, is this training or the total load of stress on this person too much? And then a little load adaptation monitoring, like, are they getting better over time? Well, I know that because I'm tracking their load. And even in my own career, like, be astonished at how many times I like just didn't track someone's load objectively over
Yeah.
time, or
Yeah.
like people, it gets easy to just fall into that trap. So like, are you trying to identify those two kind of guardrails within training? Like, what's the minimum effective dose, and then what's their maximum recoverable volume, or like what's that threshold, or it's just too much where they can't actually adapt and recover?
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are good. And something that just popped into my mind with measuring and tracking, two things is understand what you're actually tracking. What is the, like, it's not just load, like you mentioned.
Mhm.
Like, there's other things within this system of a human being that is still going in the right direction. Range of motion, strength, work capacity, all those things. Can you, as a coach, look at that and, like, are those things that you care about? Are you measuring it? And then from there, you can actually start to incorporate variables to progress them. But two, something that I've been doing that's been helping me out, uh, from a programming standpoint, is the clients that have no timeline, in a sense of like, I think I'm just
Mhm.
gonna have them for a long time, and they just want to look better naked. They want to, do things a human being can do at a high level,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
creating a timeline. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is know when their vacations are, know when their kids' spring breaks are. When are those things that you can almost put as things that you can expect and working around that,
Yeah.
and that'll put less stress on you of like, oh, I didn't know he's going to be out, on this vacation, or I didn't know, the kids are out, they're going to be, I'm not going to see him for another
Mhm.
week. So now we don't have to play scramble of like, I don't know what's going to happen now. Like,
Yeah.
ask them. Let's
Yeah.
create a timeline of what I think at least you both understand of what will be happening. Christmas, summer vacation, like, what
Yeah.
are things that you just see as a pattern in the year, and then now that's your timeline of how you can reverse engineer, the programming, like knowing that, I don't know, they'll get sick, they'll get stressed, all those things that we can't control, but like from a year standpoint, can we just start to fill in the blanks together?
Yeah.
And then now you're just
Exactly.
reverse engineering there.
Basically, you're creating a season for them.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have a sports season, you're giving them one because we can't just do the same shit forever.
Right.
So
And there's
dang,
literally seasons: winter,
we went,
fall, spring,
we
summer.
almost
So
went full, Joe Rogan on this one time wise.
I was trying.
We just went nuclear. You're forever trying to do a 3-hour episode. I'm gonna stop it.
Uh,
We're not doing a 3-hour episode. You're not gonna get me. You're not gonna get me today, JT. Not
oh
today.
man, all right. We were a third away there, but try again.
We gotta push it a little bit. All right. Let's wrap her. JT, where can people find you?
On IG and Threads, coachjt.mp3. Hit me up.
Hit
Let's
that boy
chat.
up.
Let's argue.
Thread that
Let's
boy.
agree. Let's disagree.
You can find me on IG and Threads at Nashville. You can find the show on IG, Threads, YouTube at Pushin Performance. No G.
Oh,
So
gee.
hit us up. Let us
Please.
know what we got wrong and that we need to do other PSAs for. Let us know what discussions you'd like to have with us. But as always, if you love the show love how you're supposed to. Give your boys a 5-star rating. Share it with a colleague who you think can level up. And as always, thank you for listening. We will catch you all next time.
Peace.
my fist burning in the heat, bro. Get a lot, put my